For more than 2 decades, Billy Bob Thornton stayed mostly quiet about one of the most talked-about marriages in Hollywood history. It ended suddenly, without scandal in court, without public accusations, yet it left behind endless rumors and unanswered questions. People assumed passion burned itself out, or that chaos destroyed what began in obsession. But only now, after 20 years of distance and reflection, Billy Bob Thornton is finally explaining what really happened. A man who never fit the mold. Long before Billy Bob Thornton became a household name, his life already carried the weight of instability, insecurity, and survival. Born in Hot Springs, Arkansas, he grew up moving between small towns, raised in poverty, in homes without basic comforts. His childhood was marked by dyslexia, a condition diagnosed late, which left him struggling in school and quietly convinced he was different from everyone else around him. Sports became his refuge, especially baseball, until injury closed that door without warning. By the time he reached adulthood, Thornton had already learned that dreams could vanish overnight. After briefly studying psychology, he dropped out and drifted through manual labor and low-wage jobs before moving to Los Angeles. Acting did not welcome him easily. For years, he auditioned endlessly, worked as a waiter, telemarketer, and laborer, surviving on persistence rather than promise. It was during this period that he received advice that would change his life. Write your own way in. That decision eventually led to Sling Blade, the project that transformed him from a struggling outsider into an Oscar-winning filmmaker and actor. Yet even as success arrived, something never settled. Thornton has repeatedly admitted that fame did not make him feel powerful or confident. Instead, it amplified his discomfort. He never felt at ease around wealth, influence, or social hierarchy. As his career grew, so did his tendency toward isolation, anxiety, and what he later described as agoraphobia. Marriage, during this time, became less a grounding force and more a series of impulsive decisions. He has openly said that several of his early marriages felt like moments that happened too fast, driven by emotion rather than clarity. By the late 90s, Thornton was critically respected, professionally secure, and emotionally unsettled. He had already been married multiple times, each ending quietly, leaving behind a pattern he did not yet understand. It was in this fragile emotional space that he met Angelina Jolie. Not as a fan, not as a pursuer, but as another complicated person standing at a turning point in her own life. When two unstable worlds collided. When Billy Bob Thornton met Angelina Jolie, neither of them was looking for balance. They were both standing at emotional crossroads, carrying unresolved identities, unfinished grief, and a restless hunger for intensity. They crossed paths while working together on Pushing Tin, a film about betrayal, obsession, and emotional fallout, themes that would soon feel uncomfortably close to reality. At the time, Thornton was already engaged and living a settled domestic life that, by his own later admission, never truly fit who he was. Jolie, meanwhile, had recently emerged from her own marriage and was still navigating who she was becoming. What happened between them was not gradual. It was immediate, overwhelming, and reckless in a way that felt honest to both of them. Thornton later admitted that when the connection happened, it erased everything else in front of it. Within months, he had ended his engagement, cut off contact, and shocked even those closest to him. Jolie and Thornton married quietly, without spectacle, without preparation, and without protection from the storm that was already forming around them. At first, the relationship felt intoxicating. They were not pretending to be stable, normal, or aspirational. They embraced intensity openly, almost defiantly. Public affection, blunt interviews, and deeply personal disclosures became part of their shared identity. The blood vial necklaces were not a publicity stunt to them, but a symbol of how far they were willing to go to feel connected. They spoke openly about desire, dependency, and emotional extremes in a way Hollywood couples rarely dared. But beneath the fascination, a deeper problem was forming. Thornton was deeply uncomfortable with attention, yet suddenly trapped inside one of the most media-obsessed relationships of the era. He has since explained that when they met, he was actually the more recognizable figure. But once they became a couple, the public fixation exploded beyond anything he had experienced. Every sentence became a headline. Every joke became a quote. Every private moment became public property. Angelina, by contrast, was evolving rapidly. Her world was expanding outward, politically, culturally, emotionally. She was traveling more, speaking more, engaging with causes larger than herself. Thornton, meanwhile, was retreating inward. He has openly described himself as uncomfortable around powerful people, crowds, and constant visibility. What initially bonded them, emotional intensity, slowly exposed how incompatible their inner worlds truly were. They were deeply connected, but they were not moving in the same direction, and neither of them yet understood how quickly that difference could turn love into distance. The marriage that looked loud, but felt lonely. From the outside, Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie appeared inseparable. They touched constantly, spoke openly about intimacy, and seemed to reject every traditional rule of celebrity behavior. Interviews were raw, sometimes shocking, and deliberately unfiltered. To the public, it looked like passion without limits. But inside the marriage, the reality was far quieter and far more isolating. Thornton later admitted that the attention never slowed down. Wherever they went, they were followed, analyzed, quoted, and reinterpreted. What made it worse was that neither of them was performing a role for the cameras. They were being honest, and honesty became ammunition. Thornton has said that even casual remarks between them somehow turned into headlines. Privacy did not erode slowly. It disappeared all at once. This constant exposure amplified their differences. Angelina Jolie was in a period of rapid transformation. She was traveling constantly, meeting world leaders, immersing herself in humanitarian work, and redefining her identity beyond acting. Her life expanded outward, becoming global and public. Thornton's life moved in the opposite direction. He has described himself as deeply uncomfortable around wealth, influence, and constant social engagement. Crowds drained him, events unsettled him. He preferred home, routine, and isolation. Inside the marriage, these differences were no longer abstract. They became daily friction. Jolie's schedule rarely slowed. Thornton's anxiety rarely eased. The same intensity that once bonded them began to exhaust them. Love was still present, but alignment was not. Thornton has since said that he often felt he did not belong in her world, that he never quite felt good enough standing beside her in rooms full of powerful people. That insecurity was not something Jolie created, but it was something the marriage could not fix. There were also moments of hope. At one point, they discussed adopting a child together. For a brief time, it looked like a shared future might anchor them. But as the emotional distance grew, those plans quietly dissolved. Jolie eventually moved forward alone, and Thornton has never claimed ownership of that decision. It was another sign that their paths were no longer merging. What looked wild and dramatic from the outside had become emotionally lonely on the inside. They were still close, still affectionate, still bonded by memory and history, but no longer moving through life side by side. And without realizing it yet, they were already approaching the end. The quiet collapse. No one saw coming. By the time the marriage began to unravel, there was no explosion left to witness. The intensity that once defined Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie had already burned itself into exhaustion. What followed was not betrayal played out in public, not courtroom accusations, and not a media war. It was silence, the kind that arrives when two people realize they no longer share the same emotional language. Thornton has described the end as something that felt sudden but inevitable. One moment they were still functioning as a couple, and the next, everything shifted. He later compared the breakup to a disaster that arrives without warning, not because nothing was wrong, but because the final collapse happens faster than the mind can process. There was no single argument he could point to, no dramatic turning point. Instead, there was the realization that they had changed too much, too quickly, and in opposite directions. Angelina Jolie later explained that the transformation happened within a single year. She became the person she would remain for the rest of her life, while Thornton became more deeply rooted in who he already was. That realization was frightening for both of them. They were no longer discovering each other. They were discovering that they no longer fit. What once felt electric now felt foreign. Thornton stayed largely silent after the divorce. He did not offer explanations, corrections, or counter-narratives. In private, he struggled with confusion more than anger. He has admitted that he never felt wronged by Jolie, only displaced. Her world demanded movement, visibility, and constant engagement. His world required retreat, familiarity, and emotional shelter. Neither was wrong. They were simply incompatible. The divorce itself was handled quietly. There were no public insults, no leaked documents, no attempts to rewrite history. In an industry known for spectacle, their separation was almost anticlimactic. That restraint confused the public, who expected chaos to match the intensity of their relationship. Instead, they gave the world nothing to dissect. What remained, unexpectedly, was respect. They did not erase each other. They did not pretend the marriage never mattered. Thornton has repeatedly emphasized that the relationship was real, meaningful, and formative. Even after the legal end, the emotional connection did not collapse into bitterness. It softened into something else, something quieter, less visible, but still present. And that, more than any rumor or headline, is what made their ending so difficult to understand. Because love did not disappear. It simply stopped being enough. 20 years later, the truth finally spoken. For a long time, Billy Bob Thornton let the world fill in the blanks for him. He watched as theories hardened into assumptions and assumptions turned into accepted truth. Some people believed the marriage collapsed under excess. Others assumed chaos, betrayal, or ego. Thornton did not correct them. He moved on quietly, built a life away from spectacle, and learned how to stay still. It was not until many years later, with distance, stability, and perspective, that he finally explained what actually happened. In a candid interview decades after the divorce, Thornton spoke with clarity rather than defensiveness. He did not rewrite history or downplay the relationship. Instead, he honored it. He described his time with Angelina Jolie as one of the greatest periods of his life, not despite how it ended, but because of what it taught him. The marriage, he said, did not fail due to a lack of love. It ended because love alone could not bridge two lives moving in opposite directions. Thornton explained that the breakup was civilized, calm, and mutual. There was no hidden villain and no dramatic betrayal. Their lifestyles were simply incompatible. Jolie's life expanded rapidly into a global existence, constant travel, high-profile commitments, and deep involvement with international causes. Thornton's life narrowed inward. He has openly described himself as uncomfortable around power, crowds, and constant visibility. He preferred home, routine, and familiarity. One life demanded motion, the other required stillness. What made the marriage particularly difficult, he admitted, was the attention. Public fascination with celebrity couples felt overwhelming and intrusive. Once they became a pair, they could not move through the world unnoticed. Conversations meant nothing in private because everything became public. Thornton said it felt strange to see intimacy turned into entertainment. That pressure did not create their differences, but it magnified them. With time, Thornton also gained perspective on his earlier marriages. He described them as impulsive decisions, moments fueled by emotion rather than understanding. In contrast, his long relationship with Connie Anglin unfolded slowly, privately, and without performance. It was only then, he said, that he finally found the right place to be. The life that finally made sense. After the divorce, Billy Bob Thornton did not chase reinvention. He retreated. While the world continued to speculate, he chose silence over explanation and distance over performance. What followed was not a dramatic comeback story, but a slow recalibration of life on his own terms. He continued acting, continued making music, and continued avoiding the kind of spotlight that once overwhelmed him. The chaos faded not because it was confronted publicly, but because it was no longer fed. His relationship with Connie Anglin developed quietly, without urgency and without spectacle. They met while working together, but unlike his earlier marriages, nothing moved quickly. They dated for more than a decade before marrying, choosing privacy over announcement. Thornton later admitted that he resisted marriage itself, not out of fear of commitment, but because he did not want to repeat old patterns or subject another partner to public scrutiny. When they finally married, it was simple, deliberate, and rooted in everyday life rather than fantasy. Fatherhood grounded him further. Raising their daughter became a stabilizing force, reshaping how he measured success and presence. Thornton has spoken openly about enjoying routine, staying home, and building a life that does not require constant movement. This was not withdrawal, it was alignment. For the first time, his personal life matched his emotional needs. Looking back, Thornton does not frame his marriage to Angelina Jolie as a mistake. He frames it as a chapter that could only exist at a specific moment in both of their lives. It was intense because they were unfinished. It ended because they became different people. That clarity did not arrive overnight. It took years of distance, reflection, and maturity to understand that love does not fail simply because it ends. What remains between them is respect. They do not speak often, but when they do, the connection is intact. There is no rewriting of history, no denial of meaning. Thornton has said that the relationship shaped him deeply, even though it could not last. In a world that expects explosive endings, their story concludes quietly, not with bitterness, but with acceptance. Do you believe love ends because it fails, or because people grow in different directions? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you, like the video and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.